I want to show you, whoever's watching, still watching, something else that I've been working on, because I'm proud of it, and this is also taking place kind of a bit in the future in the same universe, so you'll recognize the Marine. These are some examples of Andromedan ships. This isn't finished, but it's getting close. That takes place, so that's an image from... Okay, so stuff's going to get a bit complicated to explain what's going on there. That is the second Andromedan War in the split-off timeline created by a thing that happened that I haven't explained yet, which I'm about to explain. So, before I explain that, there are kind of two timelines happening with this. So there's the normal one, and then there's the not normal one. There is absolutely no difference between them, except for one guy. One guy in what in one of the timelines, this one guy is crazy, and in the other one, he isn't. That is the only difference. But it ends up having a huge effect on his history, I guess. The second Andromedan War is kind of what the military's been preparing for when the Andromedans come back and they have to fight. So they were detected, they found, even before this picture takes place, an Andromedan probe had been sighted near another planet that was known to have life on it that they've been kind of studying for a bit. And so all focus on operations near that planet have switched from scientific to military. Because if they do not want the Andromedans showing up. And if they do, they need to deal with it. The second Andromedan War happens when the Andromedans do show up. In the timeline where the one guy isn't crazy, the normal timeline, he has absolutely no effect on the war, and it goes as normal. The superior strategy from the Enterran army, the Enterran forces are able to overcome the Andromedans. And after a fairly short war, the Andromedans fall back. What happens after that, I haven't actually decided. I don't know if Enterra chases them or what. But in the alternate timeline where the guy is crazy, he, for some reason, feels a need to punish civilization for what he's gone through, which I haven't explained yet, but I will. And he assists the Andromedans in terms of strategy. So he's an ex-military scientist. He probably worked in the... I guess he worked probably for the Marines. I haven't decided. I never wrote that down anywhere. But he defected and started assisting the Andromedans. He started acting as a strategic advisor, I guess, is what you could call it. Basically telling them what they're doing wrong and how to do it better. And it has a huge effect on the war. It goes from a pretty quick war that the Enterrans can easily win to a very long, drawn-out war. The Enterrans are slowly losing. Because the only thing that Enterra had going for it was its strategy, and now the Andromedans have that strategy. They don't understand it as well, so they can't apply it effectively, but it takes their pretty garbage military and turns it up to like an 8 if Enterra is a 10, and so with the extra technology that they have, they're able to just win more. But the conflict, because of the scale it ends up reaching, draws the attention. It gets noticed by that other civilization, the one with the hive mind and all the other people. They notice and go to investigate. They probably contact both sides, or maybe even don't contact them. They just kind of are there. They observe for a bit and to see that the Andromedans are extremely destructive and hostile to just about everything. That the Enterrans are fighting a defensive war. And so the majority, they end up with a split. So there's the majority of the civilization sides with Enterra, but a portion, some of the more militaristic kind of factions within it, end up siding with the Andromedans because of their power. They would rather side with the villain and win than side with the good guys and lose. From their perspective, or from other people's. Just kind of a perspective that some people have on it. They see so they do it because they see the opportunity to use the Andromedans' power for their own conquests. So they side with the Andromedans, and this ends up taking the war that's already large scale and drawn out, and turns it into an even larger scale war that is even more drawn out. And that's what's happening in the other image. That planet is probably in the middle of nowhere, has absolutely no importance, except for like an ammo production facility or something, and there's a fight going on around it. But the reason, I'm going to get to the reason the guy's insane now. He was a scientist for a company called Q-Tech, or I think the full name is Quantum Technologies, but it's just known as Q-Tech. They were the company that developed the jump drives, the J drives that are used on spacecraft, and have a hand in some other military technologies, such as a laser that was developed based on the Andromedan weapons. It's a very destructive weapon that is completely, like, they don't even test it. It's treated similarly to modern nuclear weapons. If you fired it within an atmosphere, the atmosphere would burst into flame and destroy everything nearby. The laser. So they're working on, at this time, this image, when this is kind of taking place, before this happens, they are working on a project known as Portal. I don't remember, it's an acronym, but I don't remember what it stands for. Basically, they're creating wormholes that are, so they've used J-drive technology, the warp drive technology, and have used it to create long-lasting portals. Or are trying to use it to create long-lasting portals that can go not just to other places in the universe, but to different times and even different universes. The first test series, test 1A through whatever, was basic. They proved that it could theoretically work, but they weren't able to actually get it to work. The 2 series of tests was designed to get it working. Now that they had the concept, they had a functional system and were tweaking values with each test to see what worked. Test 2D, they actually hit something. A lot happened. Basically, they fired up the test as normal. They opened the portal and were gonna throw some stuff through to see how it reacted. Tests before that had opened portals, but they had been unstable, and when objects passed through, the portal would collapse. This test, they opened the portal, and they noticed that the color is a little bit different. They had anticipated that. So, like, the color corresponds to the stability. They haven't figured out what color corresponds to what yet, what colors are stable and what aren't. But I think it was, I don't remember what color it was. It was a color. It might have been yellow. And it holds itself open with nothing going through it. So one of the scientists goes and is about to throw an object in when a power surge hits that overloads. Just a bunch of stuff happens. For some reason, so there's a power surge, and the systems that are meant to prevent the power surge from affecting the lab don't work, or don't work well enough. and the power surge hits the lab and affects and overloads the portal system, the generation system. The actual specifics of why it did what it did, they don't know. It shouldn't have, based on their models. It should have just not worked. So the portal overloads, and instead of collapsing like they expected, it started to expand beyond the containment field pretty rapidly. So this is after just a couple seconds. It's already expanded beyond the containment field, and it's changing color rapidly. Starts to emit high energy radiation. The scientist in there gets out. They set off an alarm. This is like 10 seconds later. The portal is now huge, like filling the room. When it does collapse, but it doesn't collapse and close. It collapses into a singularity, which then goes. In my notes for it, I wrote that it went nova or something like that, supernova. It basically exploded. But the portal effects of it hadn't worn off, hadn't stopped, so everything within a certain radius was teleported to the portal's exit location, which happened to be a backrooms-esque. This was before I came up with this before the backrooms was popular, so this is original. It's kind of a backrooms-esque. That's not true. This was inspired by the backrooms, because I remember the fungus monster. They get teleported to this place. One of the other side effects is that the portal splits the timeline. In one of them, one scientist goes crazy because of the portal's effects, and in one of them, he doesn't. And that's the scientist that ends up having an effect on the war later. But they go in, so they are in this kind of backrooms version of the lab. It's this ruined lab. So their lab that had got sucked through the portal is kind of embedded within this older lab, and it's not a clean mix. So there's dead ends. So at the edge of the portal's radius, there's a bunch of like dead ends, walls that don't align with themselves properly, the ceiling's a different height. So they take a second to, all the scientists that got pulled through in the explosion, they take a second to regroup and make a plan. They try to reopen the portal but don't have a source of power. Besides, so like they have the emergency lights that got sucked through that are turned on and nothing else. As well as like a flashlight in a case on the wall in case of blackout. So they go take those and start exploring to see if maybe they'll find something. And they find notes in... I think all of the notes were in Russian. So a bit about Enterra, they speak kind of 3 languages, speak English mostly, but then there's also very common is Russian and the native Enterran language. But all of the notes they find are in Russian, but it's about their experiments, about the same experiments under a different name, but all the math is the same, the effects are the same. And they, after a while, they're able to use those notes to... someone also finds a power generator and turns it on. It's like a power generation room. It's got a bunch of generators, electrical stuff. He's able to turn it on. This is the scientist that goes crazy. It's the one who does that. Just a little side note, it's not important, but he does. And they're able to use those notes to reopen the portal and go back, taking some of them with them. And in the future, they're able to use those, and they take what they learned from those notes in that experiment and are able to jump forward a lot in their progress. It's a bit more complicated. So this doesn't actually tie into the picture at all. This is just some other background knowledge for a different picture, which I have closed. I'll show you that one. Hang on. because I don't think you were in the stream for that. So this takes place in an alternate timeline. In that portal test 2D, one of the scientists in one timeline doesn't go crazy, but in the alternate timeline he does, and he has an effect on the war that eventually happens, which escalates it from a small months-long thing to a galaxy-wide, decades-long series of wars. Not just between the Enterrans and the Andromedans, but within another civilization as well. That the lab that they worked in was I don't remember what city it was in. It might have been in the capital, might not. Their lab was a normal lab. It could have been one of these buildings. Probably not. These don't look like science labs. But when the portal opens and does its thing, it sucks them into they think a similar but alternate dimension, similar to the backrooms. And there was, I didn't mention this, there were monsters in it, and some of the scientists attacked some of the scientists. I don't remember my notes on the monsters. It was probably similar to the backrooms monster, because that's what inspired it. I'm sorry if it's hard to follow. I need to. I have a much more coherent note. I have pretty coherent notes on that event in my binder about all this, but I don't have binder with me right now.